Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Namaskar students, welcome to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University's Video Aids lecture session. I, Dr. Nikita Gadani, Assistant Professor, Department of English, School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. Today, topic of our session is, we'll talk about paper 4, study of short stories. In this, we will talk about The Bet by Anton Chekhov. The first will be starting about the objective, then we'll talk about introduction, then we'll talk about the analysis of the story, in which we will take plot, setting, theme of the story, various characters of the stories. Then we'll talk about the prose and style of the story. Then we'll talk about the unique techniques of the stories. Then it is followed with the conclusions and with the questions and answering sessions. So talking about the objective of our today's sessions, that what you will learn in this, that we'll talk about the plot of the story, that is the bet, and after that we'll examine the theme of the story. And after completion of this unit, what you will be able to learn, that is that you will be able to summarize the theme and the story of the bet, and you will also be able to analyze the setting of the story. So starting with the introductions, that Anton Chekhov is considered to be the classic master of short stories from Russia. He is considered to be the direct successor of giants. He is an expert in handling prose by his treatment of characters, various themes, settings and mood of the stories. Well, Chekhov is a proponent of essay on the pocket use of language and engaging style, which brings in humor along with misery for highlighting the key aspects of the life. Eventually, if we talk about him, his techniques helped in developing the form of short story. He also contributed a technique of resolving the story, which is called zero ending. And the stories with zero ending provides more realistic tone and the more realistic situations, because the readers keep guessing what will happen next. So besides, Chekhov also developed the surprise ending to challenge our predictability successfully. As a readers, we can never tell how the story might end, and as a result, even after a century, he is loved by the readers all over the world for his originality and for his freshness. So now talking about the analysis of the story, and one by one we'll talk about the plot. Like 15 years back, a banker tossed a party in which he bets with a young lawyer 2 million rubles that the lawyer could not remain in prison and for 5 years. So the lawyer increases the time to 15 years and stayed in a garden house on the banker's garden. He had no contact with any people in the middle of this time, however, has had the capacity to pursue every one of the books he could need. The lawyer read extensively from books to rationality and dialects to religious writing. Nothing more needs to be said. He enjoys a real good time in learning the best of the knowledge of the world. So presently the 15 years is nearly up, and the banker is concerned that if he will pay him the promised 2 millions, he will be a beggar. So worried banker decides to kill the lawyer so that he does not have to pay him anything. So he secretly goes into the lawyer's room, who is sleeping soundly. So as the banker is going to murder him, he finds a note that clarifies that this bat has given a good opportunity to the lawyer to be wise and renounce the material world. It turns out from the note that the lawyer is planning to escape from the house 5 hours before the decided time, and by that break the contract deliberately will be broken. So the banker is happy finding this because he does not need to pay anything to him, and therefore he kisses the lawyer's head, cries and leaves. The next day the watchman reports that the lawyer ran away early. So the banker takes the letter and places it into his safe. So by listening the plot, you might get the idea that the story that you might have heard in any of your school time or any from any other sources, that this is the story take place where the party is going on and the two friends, a banker and a lawyer, they are talking about something, and that then it end up in a bet where the lawyer take up this challenge, and he himself allows that apart from 5 years he will spend 15 years of his life, that the precious years, because he was only 25 years old, with full of dreams, with full of life, with full of energy, and at that time he decides to be there in prison for not only for 5 years but the 15 years. And at the end, when the banker get to know that after a few days the 15 years are going to be end, and that he has to pay the money which was decided at the time of a bet, that is a 2 million, and if he will pay this money he'll be a beggar. So with that thing he decided to kill his friend, that is a lawyer who was in a prison. But when he reaches over there, he found out that a note, and when it is written that he will leave this prison before the 5 hours, so that he does not need to pay anything to him. So the banker becomes very happy and he left the place. So moving further with the setting of the story begins in the same dark autumn night. However, as a master storyteller, Chekhov uses the fresh back as an artistic device, where the story begins with the banker's thinking about the night when he had made strange bet, and it was a big party of intellectual men with their interesting conversations. So probably they were all drunk, because such a weird bet is only possible when people are out of their heads and minds. So however, as it turns out, they took the bet seriously because it was made in public. So the rest of the setting is in the smaller room where the lawyer is kept for 15 years, and we find him doing all kinds of things, starting from adjusting with loneliness and frustrations to playing music and drinking wine, and finally being extremely devoted to reading to be a wiser person. So at the end of the story, we are again brought to the cold night, wherein the banker and the lawyer are alone in the garden house. So the presence of the crowd in the beginning is sharply contrasted with the loneliness in the end. As we can see that at the end of the story, we could only find the lawyer and the banker in the prison room. So it is this loneliness that makes the banker make up his mind to kill the lawyer, so that he does not have to pay him the promised 2 million ruble. The lawyer is fast asleep, and the only man in action is the banker. So it is a moment of a great conflict which makes us wonder what will happen next. And however, the appearance of the note is the final twist in the story that shows the wisdom that the lawyer has earned during the jail period. On the final counters, since the bankers does not have to pay anything as per the note, he is happy letting the lawyer leave and returns to his house at peace. So now after that, if we talk about the theme of the story, the first theme turns out to be viewing knowledge more important than the materials gains. As we can see that at the age of 25 only the lawyer chose to be in a prison so that like he can gain some more knowledge across the world. And apart from this, from the very day the bet was made, one keeps on thinking that it is for 2 million that the lawyer has to pay and has to sacrifice his freedom and went to a prison. So not only that, when the banker said 5 years, the lawyer increases the time and made it 15 years, which suggests his desperation for getting the money. And however, as the story develops, the lawyer gets busier in reading more and more diverse, and finally when he writes the note, that we discover that the lawyer actually pursued knowledge to wise, and now he does not want any money out of his imprisonment. Secondly, the bat seems to be argued that in order to get wisdom, one need to renounce the world and embrace solitude. Yes, so when you want to be a wiser person, you need to read out something, you need to spend some time with yourself and in solitude. So it is the loneliness that makes a person to spend a quality time in reading and thinking. And therefore, the story has a very powerful line, that is 15 years and imprisonment had taught him to sit still. So it means that he has no absolute control over himself, which is mark of a wise person. So there is a quality of a wise person that like when we are in a contact with a wise person, they are not only wise in terms of a knowledge or behavior or attitude, but most important aspect that they have the control of their own self, and that is the biggest quality of a wise person. So lastly, if we talk about the theme of the story, that the celebration of life is the third theme of the story, the bet. The very bet was about choosing life over death. The lawyer goes to the prison and sacrifices his freedom to make only one point: to live anyhow is better than not at all. So here we can also find the contradictory when the talk is going about the lawyer choose life over death, and it is a very positive spirit that shows Chekhov's worldview about life. The result of the bet is very clear. The banker is happy because he does not have to pay anything, and the lawyer is happy because now he has so much that he does not need anything. So now if we talk about the characters of the story, first and foremost important characters that we have, that is a banker. And banker is one of the two characters in the story. The story discusses the changes of a man undergoes when exiled to solitary confinement. And Chekhov tells the story from the point of view of banker, who is the one keeping the prisoner. And 15 years ago, when he agreed to the bet, the banker was a rich man with a millions of spare, but by the time the bet comes due, he has gambled away most of his fortune. And the amount he owes to the prisoner accounts for the most of his assets. So in order to avoid ending up broke, he contemplates killing the prisoner and pinning the murder on by one of his servants. So, however, when he decides to carry out the deed, he finds a note where the prisoner renounces his reward, and thus the banker does not have to kill his prisoner. And another important character in the story, which is the lawyer. So, the lawyer is initially presented as a young man who attends the banker's party 15 years before the story is told. He opposes the banker's argument in a heated discussions about death penalty versus imprisonment for life. The lawyer voluntarily is imprisoned for 15 years by the banker is in exchange for 2 million rubles. Before, he is an idealistic young man full of hopes and dreams and the teenager of 25. And during his imprisonment, he undergoes a massive transformation. He ultimately renounces his reward for winning the bet, satisfied instead with just providing his point. He has become a bitter skeleton man looking much more older than from his 40 years. So now talking about the prose and style of the story, while reading the bard, we come across a beautiful prose style wherein Chekhov uses 7 sections to describe the story and the development stages in the life of the characters. The distinct quality of the bard is to the point story, which does not allow the readers to get bored or get away from their sight from the main action. This does not mean that the story lacks any description detail. Chekhov's ability to make the readers imagine all the possibilities in the life of the character's life is a real gift that a short story writers can have or can give. So one of the striking features of Chekhov's prose style is to present all the background information first and then set the story on motion. For example, in the bet, we find the details of the characters, the setting, party and people, and then the process and result of the bet. Like his other stories, the bet also wake up to the content in terms of length, and in other words, he makes the story as long as the content allows it, not more and nor less. So the bat has a many proverbial statements which are so profound that we feel like using them as quotes. For example, the state is not good. To live anyhow is better than not at all. The genius of all ages and of all lands speak different languages, but the same flame burns in them all. So you have taken lies for truth and hideousness for beauty. So these are the statements that when we try to read the story, we'll get this kind of a statement, and we can also use in our routine life as well. Now talking about the unique style of the story, that we can say that the most good stories start with a fundamental list of ingredients. For example, the initial situation, conflict, complications, climax, suspense, denouncement and conclusion. And the great writers sometimes shake up the recipe and add some spice. For example, in this story, that initial situation, the death or isolation, the first thing. So the setup is pretty much just the argument at the party, that is what's better, the death penalty or the life imprisonment. How However, there are many ways to think about this, of course, and the guest offer up some of the possible questions. And for example, which one's more moral for a government to do, or say what would a person be more apt to tolerate, otherwise which is less painful. So, but instead of going with any of this, the banker host and the lawyer guest really get personal, which bring us to this story and to the rising action of the story, that is conflict and complications in the story. I see you're 5 and raise you 15. So that means the lawyer agrees to be locked up for 15 years, even though the banker's initial bet was only for 5 years. And the banker puts up 2 million rubles. Who will win the bet? For a while, looks like it will be the banker, since the lawyer is all miserable in his little guest house, asking for happy books and playing sad music to himself. And this arouses the climax, the crisis turning point in the story, that at the finish line. So, the longer the lawyer stays, the more it looks like he will be the winner, and he turns to really serious study regarding languages, religion, science, seems pretty okay to his makeshift prison. So, it is